So when you think about cybersecurity, you think about attacks against PCs, against networks. That is true, but do you know or did you know that 52% of the cyber attacks are happening at the operational level? For example, physical access control, video surveillance, sensors, pumps. So today we're going to be diving deep into cybersecurity, and we have Steve Kiss with us. Steve, thank you for being here.
Sure, thanks, Fabia.
Steve, can you tell us a little bit about your background with cybersecurity?
So I've been involved with cybersecurity on and off for about 20 years. The last 10 or so, I've been involved with cybersecurity in the operational role, building networks for access control, video surveillance, baggage handling, large-scale industrial systems. And in the last few years, as those risks have gone up to those environments, I've really directed my time towards cybersecurity and stiffening up our critical infrastructure.
That's great. And so when we think about critical infrastructure, we look at a site or a facility, and we see they have potentially like an IT department and then operational department. And with IT, you're fixed on data security, integrity. With operations, we're looking at the reliability and continuity of the devices that are downstream. So can you lend some insight as to how these departments are typically run, if there is an integration between the two departments, and how you address the despairing techniques and tools that are being deployed?
Sure. So from an IT perspective, just at a high level, we're usually concerned about risk to the quality of the data or risk to data breach. So in other words, we're worried about loss of financial data, compromise of personal health information. These are common themes within IT, and that's where most of the energy is spent. I should say that the visioning across both the organizations is the same. It's to secure the organization. But the difference is in the OT side is really continuity piece, right? It's keeping those environments running from a performance perspective and from a security perspective. So a little bit different role, and as that environment matures, as our environment in operations matures, it requires tools that are tailored towards that type of business.
Okay, so, and speaking of tools, you have a tool that you've developed,
right?
The IP meter. Can you talk about that and what it does?
Sure. So IP meter provides vulnerability assessment components to look at the environment, but also provides performance tools. There's been a 30-year jump on the IT side to provide in data center, in IT network tools. But where we've come to play is in the operational side. Our customers are operating networks, they're operating sensor networks, they're operating physical security, they're operating video surveillance, and that lends itself from a user level, a different set of tool, different way of execution. And it also provides a way for us to differentiate ourselves by having devices that live at these edge components that may not be part of the core network, that may not be part of the IT network.
Okay, so leaning in on that, how does IP meter get deployed, and who is the person or the entity that's deploying the solution?
Yeah, so very different than IT. IT, you'll hear things like, we have a software solution, you download our VM and you give us a license and you can look at your data center performance or your data center security. And the same thing in the space of end user. We have 300 end users, they all have computers. Our users, our equipment that we look at doesn't have a keyboard, it doesn't have a mouse, as you said. And the reality is that we basically have an appliance that's headless, that doesn't have a keyboard or a mouse, that the skill set required to install it is having an open Ethernet jack and be able to power it, to turn the power on.
Okay.
And then from there, we take over, our system automatically configures itself and operates. Our units are designed for hardened environments at the edge. So if it's a high heat environment, as so many closets the facilities operates are, they're different than IT closets than IDFs.
Right.
They may have vibration. These are part of an elevator control system. They may have high dust environments. So our units go at the edge. to collect as much information about OT as possible, about these operational networks, and then feeds that data to our repository. We integrate directly with IMRON. We sit on the IMRON system, and that allows users to have basically an ability to go straight from their physical security to the cybersecurity of their environments.
Right, and we really value this level of integration because right now, physical security is not just a silo, right? Like there's so many aspects of it and there's so many layers. So with UnityIS, which is a web-based platform, you have like the visitor management, you have the video, you have mobile credentials and facial authentication. But cyber now has become such a crucial part, especially in the physical security aspect of it when you're talking about operational devices. With that, what kind of information does a user, an operator, get from this?
Right. So we know that we're basically supporting a user community that may not have a heavy cyber background, right? This may not be where they come from. But interestingly, it's actually good communication. They actually have the base tools that are needed to be good cybersecurity people. They understand their physical security environment, and cyber is just an extension of that. It's just an extension of what was developed for physical security. Physical security was originally an environment long before there was cybersecurity, right? You had a rock to block your cave, right? That was physical security at one point. So we're using the techniques actually in cybersecurity that were developed in physical security. Let me just dive a little deeper. So what we need to do, since we're working with that continuity piece that we've talked about, where our motivation is continuity, we're looking at not only the cyber piece, but we're also looking at the performance piece. Because a interruption of performance means an interruption of being able to get in and out of a door. It means an interruption of the video system that someone may have. These are just the manifestations of what those system breakdowns look like. So our system goes in and it looks at system log files. It looks at performance and vulnerability testing. And to drive that home, because sometimes you just need some examples. If you're using a system like Unity where you're reaching out to credential systems, when we look at IT and this operational piece, one of the original arguments is, oh, that's siloed. Facilities or the physical security people are over in this silo and they don't connect to IT. So we call that out of scope. So from a HIPAA perspective or from a PCI perspective, we call that out of scope. But the reality is that the value of integration is to take data from all different data sets. And once we do that, we're breaching that plane. And the value that so many of these different manufacturers are bringing, IMRON is one of them, is to basically pull data out of repositories that may live in OT. Well, you're no longer siloing your environment anymore. And once you break down that silo, you get a ton of advantages. But now you have to start looking at how are we going to protect the edge of that operations, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the thing. I think it's trying to get a good integration or a good crosstalk, right? Between IT and operations to ensure that there's security just not only at your computer, but at your video camera, right? Or your access control controller, for example. When an integrator installs, right? So we're talking about deployment, and what do you see as the value for someone coming in? So they're installing access controllers, they're installing video cameras. How does this piece come into this whole?
Yeah. I mean, it's an important question, right? It's really easy to say, oh, that's a cyber problem. Someone should call IT if you want to talk about that, right? But let's look at it from an integrator standpoint, first of all. Having been an integrator, one of the big risks that an integrator has when they take on a project is the kind of unknown component of the variables, right, of an installation. Let's take a firm price quote. Well, we don't know what we have, but we'd like a firm price quote. So having a tool that you can put on the network initially during the pre-construction environment is helpful just in getting a baseline of what that environment looks like, a baseline for the performance, a baseline for the security, all of these pieces. And what that does for the integrator is it helps with risk mitigation, right? It's a risk mitigation tool to make sure that projects don't spiral out of control. There's a second component of that for the integrator, and that's once the product's installed, how do you know when you're done with the project? How do you know when project completion happens? And I think, IMRON's sensitive to that, right? Like they need to be sensitive to these integrators that there's a certain dollar value associated with a project, and that erodes over time if the installation isn't done in a high quality manner. So there's a set of standards for high quality installation best practices.
Absolutely.
And inside of those best practices is setting high quality security standards and setting high quality performance standards. How do you know if you can add 20 more door controllers? How do you know if you can add 40 or 50 more cameras to the system? And we focus a lot on cybersecurity, but since cybersecurity in the operational sense is very tied to reliability, these are the things that we collect. These are the data components that we collect for an integrator in the build stage of their life cycle. In the operational stage, where they have ongoing operations, we need to be cognizant of rolling of trucks, right? Like traditionally, if a camera goes offline, we'd roll a truck. But now we have capabilities to see what's causing that, right? Is it just that someone broke the camera off the wall? Or is it more complicated than that? These networks can get pretty complicated. So we're looking at those network issues and we're determining what the root cause is. Maybe it could be something that can be repaired without rolling a truck. So two pieces. You have the commissioning and build out, and the value that it brings to the integrator and helping mitigate risk there. And then in the operational role, it basically provides a stream for the integrator to now integrate analysis of their environments or their customer environments to determine, how to repair and support their customers.
And when you say, like, especially when going back to the operations and the analysis, so this is something that's happening, it's an ongoing thing. Like it's not like you've installed, you're checking the environment and then you pull it out. It's constantly navigating through the environment.
Yeah, so you install one of our appliances. It works through Unity from the user interface perspective. And then from then on, it's monitoring that environment, sending alarms, trouble tickets, whatever the mechanism is for communication. But if things that we've all seen before, I'll run through a few examples. Somebody decides to put their computer onto the access control network, and now the access control network doesn't have enough bandwidth. Who's responsible for that?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And how do we basically mitigate some of those activities? So that's one example. How do we know about expansion? How do we know about failure? How do we know about evolving security risk? Right? When we look at the landscape of cybersecurity, we may install something in year 1 and year 3, there may be a technology that allows that system to be cracked. We're constantly updating our libraries, and we will constantly provide information about what the cyber stance is of the devices that are on that network. So inventory, performance, and security. And you can kind of do that all in an environment where it's displaying that to either the integrator as your support personnel or to the integrator and the end user.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And these are the types of tools that are so crucial, especially now, with the direction, the environment, the landscape of cybersecurity. So Steve, thank you so much for all the information. I think there's a lot to unpack generally with cybersecurity, but I think you've kind of narrowed it down into the focus that's so valuable, especially for the physical security space and the cyber landscape. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Fazia. It's great to be working with IMRON. It's good to see us bringing this physical security and the cybersecurity together in a platform that can support the community, frankly.